When authorities inspected a home in Florida, they discovered a 16-foot predator prowling the cellar. As the two men approached the beast in front of them, they knew they were in a dangerous situation. The predator was huge, measuring up at 16 feet long and tipping the scales at around 165 pounds, making it of a size rarely seen before. And even more terrifyingly, it appeared that the intruder was hiding something in the shadows. The beast wasn't the type of house guest to be typically found in this part of the world either. The pair who discovered the interloper knew then that they would need an expert in helping removing it. But after a specialist came, he too may have been taken aback. Even with his professional experience, he'd rarely seen anything quite like this before. What's more, the predator in question is not just deadly to humans, it's also a recognized threat to local wildlife. Members of its species have been known to devour such creatures as possums, rabbits, bobcats, and deer, for example. And alarmingly, a critter of this size has the ability to tackle prey larger than even that. On one occasion, another of its kind was spotted feasting on a 7-foot-long alligator. The two men first encountered this lethal specimen in July 2019 beneath a home on an island in Florida's Everglades. And as they weren't best equipped to deal with the intruder, they ultimately decided to call a local conservationist, Ron Bergeron, whose work has earned him the moniker Alligator Ron. It should be known though that the discovery had nothing to do with that particular type of reptile. It may come as a surprise as the Everglades are known for its gators. Located in the south part of Florida, the unique national park, the largest of its kind in the US, is easily accessible from the busy urban sprawl of Miami. A 60-minute car journey is all that separates the concrete jungle from the extraordinary biodiversity of this stunning ecosystem. The Everglades National Park covers an expansive 1.5 million acres, and airboat expeditions are offered to the area's 1 million or so annual tourists. These thrilling rides dash through the swamps at nearly 60 miles per hour, giving passengers an up-close view of the fascinating wildlife and lush vegetation. And as the biggest subtropical habitat in the country, the Everglades naturally hosts an extensive array of animals. Its mangroves and grass marshes, for example, are home to varieties of snakes and wading birds, as well as alligators. For many decades, though, the wetlands were deemed surplus to developers' requirements, meaning a number of swamps were ultimately drained to make way for roads, farmland, and property. As a result, Florida residents may share the land with the area's wilder inhabitants. Visitors can see these creatures too. They may get a glimpse of manatees swimming in the waters, for instance, or bobcats and white-tailed deer roaming the pastures. Those with more patience and a keen eye may even spot members of more threatened species, such as the Florida panther or the American crocodile. Many of the in excess of 350 bird species native to the area are also incredibly rare. The large but graceful wood stork has been deemed by the US government as endangered, for example. This wading bird casts an elegant silhouette and is beloved for both bird watchers and nature photographers. Also registered on the threatened or endangered lists are the Cape Sable seaside sparrow, the Everglades snail kite, and the red-cocketed woodpecker. Birds, however, are not known to be a threat to humans. So what lurks in the Florida swamps that may pose a real danger to any person in the vicinity? Well, although the West Indian manatee is perhaps the most distinctive Everglades resident, the placid mammal is more a gentle giant than a menace. These animals lumber softly through the water and may seek out humans for both company and a source of warmth. Manatees also mostly take their nourishment from aquatic plants. In fact, humans are much more of a threat to the manatee than they are to us, as these sea creatures are so leisurely in their movements that they can prove vulnerable to passing dangers. For instance, they're sometimes too slow to avoid speeding boats, which can maim or kill any animal in their paths. And while the manatee is also on the endangered species list, arguably the rarest creature to be found in the Everglades is the Florida panther. These wild cats were once desirable trophies for hunters, meaning unfortunately that they were almost wiped out entirely. Indeed, conservationists believe that fewer than 100 of these animals now remain in their natural habitat. Yet although humans may pose more of a threat to both the Florida panther and the manatee than they do to us, the same cannot be said of some of the other Everglades residents. The Florida black bear, for instance, is considered one of the most dangerous animals in the state. As it too is endangered, however, members of the species are seldom spotted in the national park. Many visitors to the Everglades may also be unaware that its waters may host sharks. Yes, while these fearsome predators usually prefer the salt water of the ocean, there are some varieties, such as lemon shark and blacktip sharks, whose body functions can adapt to the fresh waters of Florida swamps. And unfortunately, they include one of the most dangerous species around. We're talking about the aggressive bull shark, which can sometimes be seen patrolling the Everglades channels as well as the mouths of rivers and cruise coastlines in search of prey. However, while these beasts are known to ambush humans, they typically prefer to feed on much tinier animals. Elsewhere in the Everglades water, certain types of fish can pose a threat to humans. Indeed, although barracudas very rarely attack people, they can sometimes be attracted by anything particularly eye-catching, such as jewelry that swimmers may be wearing. This can occasionally provoke the fish into assuming that there is prey, like the silvery fish they feed upon in the water. Marlins, meanwhile, are more of a danger to fishermen in the area. Some underwater attacks may come completely by surprise too. For instance, while the needlefish may seem relatively unassuming, typically coming in at around a foot in length and less than a pound in weight, its razor-sharp mouth is nevertheless a hazard. And although this creature is not known as a human predator, it's still capable of causing damage. Needlefish usually travel close to the surface of bodies of water near the coast where it's warm. However, if they're fleeing predators or chasing their prey, they may take flight for brief periods and rise to the top. Anything that gets in the needlefish's way then may just feel how sharp its mouth is. Then there's the box jellyfish, as the ocean's most venomous inhabitant is also known to reside in the Everglades channels. There are between 20 and 30 varieties of this creature, which can measure anything from under an inch to 10 feet. Regardless of the box jellyfish's size though, it should definitely be avoided, as victims can die after experiencing the pain of its sting alone. And perhaps the most famous Everglades predator is the alligator. The reptile can easily be confused with a crocodile, of course, although there's an easy way to tell them apart. Simply put, an alligator has a round, broad nose. The same feature on a crocodile, however, comes to a point. In addition, alligators are largely more common across the whole of Florida, while crocodiles live only in the most southerly regions of the state. Crocodiles can be just as vicious as alligators too, though the American variety is less aggressive than many of its counterparts from around the world. And while alligators tend to strike only when they feel threatened, they should nevertheless be avoided as well. Yet Bergeron faced none of these animals beneath the Florida house. In fact, the creature he discovered in the basement was itself a threat to much of the Everglades' native wildlife. It was a breed of snake called a Burmese Python, and one of its kind had once been reported to have swallowed an alligator whole. At 165 pounds and around 16 feet long, the python was the second largest that Bergeron had ever seen. In fact, from nose to tail, the snake was merely a foot away from being the longest ever measured in the state. Perhaps most terrifyingly of all, though, the female predator was protecting a nest of at least 50 eggs. And this frightening reptile was found underneath a house in Broward County that sits 4 miles from Alligator Alley. Alligator Alley is an 80-mile stretch of highway that dissects the Everglades National Park between Fort Lauderdale and Naples, and as its name suggests, it's a prime location for gator spawners. The native wildlife in the area is under threat, however, from the Burmese python. The Burmese python typically has a placid nature, and combined with the attractive designs that appear on its skin, this makes the species a favorite among snake owners. But these snakes can grow quickly and can get incredibly large. Then when they become too much to their handlers, they can become aggressive. Attacks then are not unheard of, and some have been fatal. The snake's diet consists purely of meat, with birds and small mammals primarily featuring on the menu. As the python's vision isn't too good, however, it relies on heat receptors lining its jaws and chemical sensors on its tongue to close in on its prey. And killing for the Burmese python is an act of brute strength. You see, the Burmese python is a constrictor, meaning it will wrap its body around its chosen victim after having gripped it with its teeth. Then the snake will crush the breath out of its prey until it's dead. And so, as the Burmese python's jaws are so flexible, it's able to gobble its meal up in a single piece. Young Burmese pythons are frequently found in trees, although slivering up trunks become more awkward after they've matured. As these creatures can come in at around 23 feet and 200 pounds, however, they can practically be the size of a tree themselves. In fact, these snakes have been described as growing to be as thick as a telephone pole. So all of this makes the Burmese python one of the biggest and deadliest snakes in the world. Even more alarmingly, the snake is an expert swimmer capable of remaining underwater for half an hour before coming up for air. But while this may make the Everglades swampland fertile ground for the species to thrive, there's a problem. As you may have already assumed, Burmese pythons are native to Southeast Asia rather than the wetlands of the Florida Everglades. And while these reptiles were first introduced to the area over 2 decades ago when snake enthusiasts snapped them up, members of the species didn't work well as domestic animals. According to the US Department of Agriculture, some of these pets then went on to escape into the wild, while others were deliberately released. As a result, the Burmese python is now considered an invasive species without any natural predators to keep the population in check. And owing to the snake's appetite for native animals such as limpkins, wood storks, and Key Largo wood rats, fauna in the area is now in considerable peril. In 2019, Bergeron explained to the South Florida Sun-Sentinel, "The Burmese python poses a significant threat to the Florida Everglades by disrupting the natural food chain, but the conservationists' actions prevented an influx of this apex predator." As you'll recall, the snake in the Broward County home was female and guarding a nest of around 50 eggs. And worryingly, a number of the eggs were actually cracking open as Bergeron surveyed the nest site. Fortunately, though, the specialist was able to relocate both these and the snake guarding them. With good fortune, we were able to find a large female and remove her and a nest of up to 50 baby snakes, which would have continued killing off our precious habitat. Bergeron continued to the South Florida Sun-Sentinel. In fact, the hunting of Burmese pythons in the Everglades is actively encouraged. No license is required to hunt the pythons, nor are there any restrictions on when they may be pursued. Some have even turned the tracking of these snakes into a sport, with the annual Python Challenge encouraging members of the public to capture as many of the slithering pests as possible. Local wildlife trapper Mike Kimmel, a self-avowed python cowboy, has proved himself particularly accomplished at ridding the area of the snakes, having captured 8 of the invasive species during the 2020 Python Challenge. Yet while this total accounts for 1/10 of the number of the snakes hunted down in the competition this year, it's made scarcely a dent in a population estimated to be in the tens of thousands in the Everglades. Kimmel found the going hard too. In a January 2020 Instagram post he wrote, "It wasn't an easy win, that's for sure. I ran into all kinds of obstacles. I hunted 10 days straight, covering thousands of miles of levees and woods and sleeping in the swamp when not hunting. I kept my nose to the grindstone and I can proudly say I gave it my all." That said, the incentive to track down these snakes can be huge. Indeed, those who hunt for a living can expect a return of a few $100s in government payouts for every python captured. Then, once the snakes are euthanized, they can be used in different ways. For instance, Kimmel gives snake meat to the wild hogs on his property. Speaking of his spoils to the guardian, the trapper added, "It's good money. A large snake can be worth about $1,000 to me." The Burmese python skin can also be used to manufacture luxury goods such as purses, boots, and wallets. Typically, these reptiles have tan-colored outsides that feature dark patchwork similar to that of a giraffe. And while these markings are non-uniform, they nevertheless appear to slot together, much like elements of a jigsaw. So while the Python Challenge may not be completely ridding the Everglades and its surroundings of its creatures, it may help. After all, conservationists have spent years attempting to gain control over the python population in Florida, even going so far as to employ chanting snake charmers from India. And his research has shown that a rise in python numbers has coincided with a significant decline in wildlife native to the Everglades. Winning the battle against the snakes may be crucial in keeping this part of the state at its best.